Welcome to this episode of the Cloudsourcing Storytelling Podcast. Host Julian Mitchell will be connecting you with guests from a wide range of different media genres and platforms. In today's episode, the panel is discussing how the cloud is making access to filmmaking talent and technology much more democratic. Guests include cinematographer Sarah Thomas Moffat, UK Film Festival Director Murray Woodfield, and Acquisition Solutions Specialist Alvaro Ortiz. Welcome to the Cloudsourcing Storytelling Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cloudsourcing Storytelling. This episode, we're talking about democratizing filmmaking, which is, I think, a subject I've been writing about for about 20 years. But we're talking particularly in this episode about how the cloud promises to do that. And with us today, we have Murray, Sarah, and Alvaro. Murray, you're in charge of a film festival, a UK-based film festival, but a travelling one. Let me ask you: the filmmakers that you know and you support and you help through getting their content on screen.
Short filmmakers are not trying to monetize their product necessarily. They just want their product to be seen. Because that may seem strange, but a lot of filmmakers of short films, they want exposure. They're mainly starting off their careers, they want exposure. Those who have gone on to making feature films, that's a different story. They want a way of monetizing it. So the cloud might provide a revenue stream as well as a visual stream, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, so indirectly they're already using the cloud, whether they know it or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I would say so.
And Sarah, what about you in your experience? I mean, you're deep into virtual production, and so the cloud is part of your everyday working life.
It is in this world of virtual production, certainly between workflows, distribution to client and agency, cross-pollination of a lot of co-production in the from one country to another. As far as like the independent world goes, that is, we can tap into that. It's the cloud. I think on a very underground level is starting to be understood, but the bigger conversation is who's accessing it with what resources, and that's the whole side on the diversification of the tools today becoming more available to people so more people can make more things, if that sort of makes sense. We can expand on that.
Sure. And Alvaro, you're a product specialist for Sony. Could you lay out what the theory is or what's happening now with the cloud, especially the Sony Creator Cloud, and what it might mean for independent filmmakers in the next, say, 5 years?
I would say that in a traditional workflow, we used to separate a lot what's going on in the camera and what's going on after. And the good thing is that frontier, that obstacle that was in the middle, which is basically the ingest, is being diluted, and things can be done directly from the camera, and you can do things over the camera as time passes, and it's related to camera configurations, is related to camera control, and of course the clips itself. I mean, it's not only a matter of uploading the proxy file, but you can even upload the typical slog, high frame rate, blah 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 4K file directly into the cloud. So the timing, the typical workflow is being stretched and allowing more talented people to do their things in a wider time, because you are reducing those ingest times that are usually very physically goofy sometimes, because you need to go from point A, which is shooting, to point B, which is to be ingest. And especially if you are a one-man band, sometimes it's not so easy to have that agile workflow. And for instance, nowadays, the camera itself can directly upload into an FTP, a folder. You can even match with metadata. So I think that it's not the future, it's here today, not as a prototype, not as a proof of concept, but as a reality that is working as of today. Maybe people understand that it started with the higher production houses, but you can do it in any range of production. So everybody can take advantage of that.
You were talking earlier about a situation where your physical media becomes invisible, and you could almost, I think you said you can almost format your card while you're uploading. Or after shooting, of course, yeah.
Yes, after. Yeah, you can automate the files to be uploaded, and once they are in the cloud, you haven't even touched the media, and once they are up there in the cloud, they can be easily replicated, they can be easily modified by anybody. Maybe you have, as I was saying, the editor in Canada, the colorist in Dubai, you have somebody creating the metadata in Spain. And as long as the file has been uploaded, you can, after that, format it if you are sure that it is out there.
Right.
But as time passes, less and less media is being touched by the hands or put inside a card reader or a laptop. I think that stage is going not to disappear, but is going to take less relevance. And that typical situation in which we start in saying, "Oh, my card, I have lost it," whatever. I think it's going to have less relevance. And for instance, in terms of insurance, in terms of you have shot some very special content that it can be even dangerous to be held in your camera, can automatically be uploaded. And if the bad guys grab you and tell, "Please remove or delete the file," okay, you can delete it, but it's already uploaded. So your workflow and your way of thinking is much wider, and that is obviously an advantage.
It is, and all of that's fascinating, and it is evolution. Though with that comes security. So any given show is not going to save money by not having a data manager, etc., on set, or ensuring cards or shipping hard drives. They're actually going to spend that money on a secure network and a firewall on top of firewall, and something like Perforce that Unreal is making, all those things. And if you've ever tried to log into Perforce, it's like Fort Knox. It is like trying to get in. And then once you're inside, the operating system inside is actually not easy for a basic user to use with an average laptop. It looks easy, but if the file dump is large, like 75 gigs or more, they can't scroll around if it's in high resolution. Like, there are steps. The evolution will continue to improve, but a client and agency type of person or executive producer who's flying around the place or playing with their kids and looking at stuff on their phone is not going to spend half an hour trying to log into Perforce to look at something that's happening in another country. So there is great stuff on the digital side of technology, and the evolution is awesome for sharing. But up front, those producers and executives and studios are going to have to put that money down to protect that. Because if you have a card or a roll of film, if you go back to film itself, you have that negative. You're the only one with that negative. And you have the magic of that. You have the content. It cannot be hacked. It cannot be, exposed, et cetera, et cetera. So with evolution and expansion, there is contrast, there is risk. Then we'll find a path through that, but there will be people that will take advantage of that.
And Alvaro, what would you say to Murray's customers or Murray's film festival entries, the people who are just doing all they can to actually make something, so they want people to see it? Do you think they should take time and think about what the future holds, or is it all about making something?
I think that the best thing that we have around us, and I feel very, very lucky for that, is people is very talented about in this world, in this audiovisual world. And my feeling is let them do what they are best in. But for that, for having most of the time doing what they are best in, you need to have a technological substrate below that knowledge that can sustain and can optimize what they do. And for instance, if you think not about let's say a video creator, but ENG, people can shoot more time with talented people, with talented cameraman or camerawoman, with some journalists, instead of spending time in a car bringing the car from point A to point B. Related to filmmakers, I would say that we shouldn't think about the cloud just as for a platform for distribution, but also as a collaborative system. It can be an ecosystem in which, for instance, you shoot something and the DIT gives his or her opinion, then the colorist can give some feedback, then the editor, the producer, and everything can be much more agile because it can happen even in the same afternoon when you have been shooting in the morning. So it can be much faster in terms of decision making, and it can optimize the talent because you can shoot more takes. You can, for instance, you can think about one planification for one shooting, but then if you have time, you can think about other camera position, other lighting, other thing that can enrich your production. And that is something that the more you know about the platform you are using to optimize it, the more you can do that kind of actions, which are always positive, I think.
All right. Murray, is there room for that kind of education in your festival?
There is, and in fact, it's be a very good idea. We could do an event to actually talk about that new possibility, because most filmmakers that I meet are working, I'm not saying at an analog level, but they're slightly old school, digital old school. And the idea of, for instance, I'm working on a project at the moment where we keep sending our files to LA for the effects, special effects person to look at and comment on how they're going to actually do the files. I'm listening to this and going, why aren't we on the cloud? And so I've been educated today as to how far I've been aware of it, but I think it's...
So you're physically sending drives?
Yeah, well, no, we're not physically sending them. We're uploading them and maybe getting them off WeTransfer, and that somebody's sitting with that, and they're going to do their work. And Alvaro's contribution here today, I'm going, well, what have I been thinking? There's obviously technology I'm not using that's right here and now. So thank you, Alvaro.
My pleasure.
So Sarah, what would you advise Murray to do via cloud? What kind of platform would you use for that?
With a card, and I had to convince filmmakers that it was okay to shoot on a card. They couldn't wrap their head around it. And I was like, no, I got this hard drive and a computer, I can do all this. And they were just like, what? You know?
I remember being that person.
Guilty.
It takes time. It takes time for the transition of trust to happen, right?
Yeah.
Is I guess my point. And I still, even in documentaries that are being done today, if we're shooting digitally on data, any card stores, those field people are out in the middle of nowhere. You usually don't have access to the internet unless you're using Starlink now. But how long is that upload going to take? You're constantly on the move from location to location. Sometimes you don't have power for days. I've done a lot of field work, both in documentary and factual reality programming for people like Discovery, History Channel, where I'm literally off the grid for 4 months at a time. And so my data in those cases was we had a home base off grid, and I would be sent out beyond that, and I'd be off grid for a week, and I'd have like a Sony F900, F800 with me with enough cards or discs, and I would shoot all that out, get back to the home base that was still off the grid. Then that would start to get ingested by the home editor and then sent down with drives to a city and then ingested into that location, into their by their post-production supervisor. And that took 2 weeks before they saw anything, 2 to 3 weeks before they started seeing any of the story content. And we're all out there working away and they have no idea what's happening, right? So, I know it's becoming more sophisticated, and that's why we're talking about this, but it is an evolution of trust. I mean, even on those shows, I've done 3 seasons of Amazing Race Canada, and that Amazing Race franchise is a competition, for example. So if you're shooting digital formats now where it can be sent to the cloud using smaller, lightweight cameras physically on those competition type shows, which are actually growing and very popular now, new versions of them are beyond the Survivor show or happening all the time. But that's because I've worked on the inside of that. I know, like, we would still shoot Amazing Race Canada on Sony F800s with discs. And I was like, when I started on the show in 2017, I think, I was like, so why don't we use new cameras that are like way lighter, because we're running with like 30-pound rings on our shoulder, right? For 30 days. And they were like, no, this is the security. It goes on the disc. Nobody else has it. Nobody can, download it. Nobody can ruin the security of the competition of the show, right? And so those discs we carry those around. We get back to a base. We give those over, and they get sent to post-production. And it's all internal. They're super, super sensitive about the security of that, especially on competition. So anyway, it's a really fascinating time digitally, and I think everything is possible, and the choice is going to come down to the producers and executives, not the cinematographers. It's going to come down to them and what they're willing to put into budget to secure it and how they want to work. And the locations. Are you in a virtual production studio? Or are you out in the field running after people, right? A lot of factors at play.
But how do you refine that practice? I mean, you're saying that, the F800 with discs, how is, through technology, how is that refining? Now, how do your producers take advantage of that refinement? Because these shows are great, and as you say, they're getting more popular.
Yeah, I think some of the newer shows might be adopting newer ways. I kind of broke away from the reality TV world by 2019 because I'd done so much of it. I was like, yeah, I'm not chasing people with a camera for the rest of my life. I want to sit in a studio on a dolly and tell people what to do now. So that's what I'm doing. But it just work in a more collaborative space where I actually can use cameras like the Sony Venice 2, which I love. I've used the Sony Venice 1, which is amazing, and just expand on that collaboration. There is more opportunity to collaborate when you're working in that narrative sort of, more commercial space. It's so there, but to answer your question, I never understood their logic. I just understood that they wanted that security. That's how they saw that security happening for them, that there was only one negative, right?
Yeah.
And they had it, and they had control of it physically. They could touch it. I think understanding the security of the cloud, again, is an education process for a lot of them if they start to move into that, so they can use more lightweight cameras, because we burn out. Like the operators, it's military and we're tough, but it takes a human toll for sure, right?
Right. I mean, do you actually practice what Alvaro is preaching? Are you uploading into the cloud, and is your media not as important as it used to be?
For some virtual production content, yes. We've been using the cloud. Outside of that, it's still data. We're still using cards. Commercial work now, there's not a lot of producers busy right now that can utilize these tools on a very high production scale. That's just the reality that we're physically in right now. Now that will pass. Are people educating themselves right now? I know London has a very active in the sort of education aspect of technology and meetups and such. Elsewhere in the world, Canada's kind of slow with that. A few things here or there, but certainly the productivity is London and Hollywood, Los Angeles, a lot of productivity there for education. So I think that's it. I think now would be the time for people like Sony to really, pedal to the metal with that education. This is how you use the cloud. This is how we can make it adaptable and safe for you, and get it into their minds that it is safe. It can be safe, and we can do it successfully. And then actually have technology like Perforce and Unreal Engine and Halon and Lux Machina, those people that actually use the cloud a lot on that back end between building assets and changing control of assets from lighting to location and things like that, make it more user-friendly and easier for cinematographers and directors, production designers to get in there and look at it and collaborate, because those firewalls themselves do take a sign-in process, the technology, unless you're computer savvy, again, like a producer jumping from plane to plane or something, they're literally looking at stuff on their devices. And then they're like, oh, it's too dark. And it's like, it's not dark. You're standing outside trying to look at your phone, and so that, I think that needs to be mitigated and accounted for, Anyway, sorry, I get excited.
No, it's good. Very good points you're making. Alvaro, are these some of the questions that you were getting at in Amsterdam a few weeks back?
One of the typical things or conversations were pretty much related to what Sarah was commenting, that we need, or people need to trust on that. It needs to be reliable. And I think that a very good tip that Sarah was providing is to work the traditional way, and additionally to that, as of now, in the cloud way. There will be a moment in which we can relay, as you were commenting, from passing to tape to card and all that stuff. I think that in the beginning, for instance, when we started with cards, people typically came from discs, and discs are typically used for storage. So you ingest and store the disc. With the cards, it's different. You need to reuse them because mainly they're expensive. So now we need to change the mindset again, but it can be as easy as you want it to be. I mean, you can nowadays work the, let's say, traditional digital way, which is I have my card, it needs to be secured and in a safe place and all that stuff. But in parallel to that, you can improve your workflow. And there will be one moment in which naturally you will have migrated into that. And then you are totally used to that workflow. And that is one of the things that was one of the hot topics there. Also added to there was a big amount of conversations related to AI, to how can we integrate new, really, really new technologies with workflows that should be existing right now, like cloud-based things. How can we get advantage of that? And for instance, I don't know how to create a speech to text in order to get the subtitles very fast? How can we relight a scene, which is something that was a dream 2 years ago, and now in an editing system you can do that. So why not in the scene? So there are many, let's say, gateways that can be connected to the core way to do things that definitely will help us. So, for instance, you can ingest metadata because you are shooting in the, in the afternoon. Also, one thing that is changing, from my point of view, everything is virtual production, because you can shoot exactly the same sunset during 8 hours, for instance, and not only when it happens. And that is something that is evolving a lot, is being integrated, as Sarah said, with many cloud, let's say, sources of information. Maybe you want to change some scene very fastly, but you have the latest news of something that has happened in Taiwan these days, for instance. So it's evolving very fast, and the good way to think about that, let's say, like thinking like an engineer. You have a toolbox, and you have things. Maybe you don't ever use a screwdriver, but you need to know how to use it if needed. So this is the mindset that we are here to help, and not only us. I mean the other brands also, because they are doing very, very fine. But the good thing is to provide tools to people to make their lives easier and much more comfortable. And for instance, if people, instead of spending 12 hours in a shooting set, they can be 8 hours and 4 more with their families, that is positive. And that is one of the things that we want to improve. And that can come from those new tools that we are providing.
Okay, Murray, can I talk to you about what your filmmakers might think of? I know it's technical, and I know cloud is maybe something they've touched on, and maybe virtual production is an unknown to them, but these things are here and arriving in sophisticated terms very quickly. So do you have an educative part of your festival for this kind of thing?
We do, but we do less of it. We focus mainly on the screenings of the new works and the discussion that goes around those. I attend Cannes every year, and they do a lot where they discuss the new technologies, and all the new technologies actually showcase themselves there. And most of the filmmakers there are hungry for the knowledge. Those kind of aspirational filmmakers that are kind of moving with where things are happening, they're going to know about this stuff. And I think the hunger is there, and perhaps the companies that provide these cloud services should talk to film festivals like they do in Cannes and have a presence. I think that's important. The presence is the education.
The skill of the filmmakers that you know, I'm sure, given the power of virtual production, even in a small way, and given the power of cloud, even in a small way, they can do amazing things with technology. It doesn't have to be amazingly expensive.
There are many things and many sources of information that can help a lot. And also one of the things that we are trying to convert into is that we are not only the provider, we want to help. And one of the things that, for instance, is we want to help with the mindset, with what people think is virtual production. Everybody thinks about virtual production as the big Mandalorian stage and all that thing. But now we are mature on those technologies, and maybe that is not needed everywhere. Maybe something like what we had at IBC, which is 300 inches, something like that, plus Unreal Engine, plus the typical tools, the typical tracking system and the camera. It can pretend you to be in Tokyo, in the Sahara, in Madrid, and you don't need a very big stage, because nowadays most of the productions for the platforms we know are short up to medium or even American shots, but they don't used to be very big shots, and for that you have a plate in which you can integrate your background. So things are changing, I think that for good, because imagine a service company. They need to be very knowledgeable, but they also need to earn money. If you have only one big screen, like the Mandalorian type, you only have one production. But if you have a set with multiple boxes, which are, 60 square meters each one, and you can have 3 screens, smaller size, maybe 80% of the productions can work most of the footage in that situation. And maybe you have only a big one that is only used for big things, let's say. So it's technology is changing a lot, but I think that we also need to change. And I mean, not every car is a Formula One, and that is something that we want to educate about. And a good place, a good forum is obviously the festivals.
Sure.
Another place to talk about is the typical the film schools. That is the good thing. The big advantage of all this is that everyone that is in this environment is very knowledgeable. I mean, everybody wants to know more. And if you are just shooting, you don't know just about shooting. You see a lot of movies, you see a lot of lenses, you know about sensors. And the more you know, the better professional you are. And I haven't seen in 16 years anybody that says, I have learned enough, I don't want to learn more.
Okay.
And that is, and one basic pillar for that is the manufacturers, for instance, and we are there for that. So count on us.
All right, Sarah.
The message.
Sarah, can we finish with you? Can I just put to you that if you, say 20, 25 years ago when you were starting out and you had virtual production and cloud, what would the kind of things you would do to use them, even at the lowest level? Would you be able to enable them?
Yeah, great question. I would definitely do what I'm doing now, which is actually creating my own content outside of being a cinematographer, producing more, working with directors more, actually writing things based on tests that I shot in virtual production, actually, where we are then teaming up and applying for Canadian funding resources to say, hey, can we develop this, So I would definitely have taken advantage of those opportunities 25 years ago, and beyond that, they did not exist, and it's not only that, it's the, to expedite the quality and parity now is an interesting playing field because things are starting to level out. We still have a long way to go once you get to a certain budget. There is still this, imaginary glass ceiling that happens. And we're starting to break through that as women who are cinematographers specifically, which is a very, as we know, male-dominated field still when you're working at studio production level. So that's where my mind is set right now. I've done Canadian studio production, but more broadcast for CBC and such. So now I want, bigger ponds, bigger fish.
Good for you.
Yeah, so definitely take advantage of it. Do go as far as you can with it.
All right, brilliant. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks so much, all of you, for coming and talking about this. It's been great. It's good stuff. I think I've certainly learned something, and Murray said you've learned something too. So
definitely, every day I learn something. Today I learned more.
All right, thanks again. Thanks very much.